Hi, I'm Charles Galda, President of Vision New England, and your host for the Church in Action program, where we talk with New England leaders about the imperative to make disciples, do justice, foster unity, and share Jesus to transform New England. This week, I'm talking with Pastor David Swaim. He's a New England native, grew up around Boston. Since 2000, he's pastored Highrock Covenant Church, in Arlington, Massachusetts, which serves 10 locations across Eastern Mass. Dave, thanks for being with us today.
I'm glad to be with you.
Dave, I was listening to a sermon you did not too long ago, and it really resonated with some of the research we've been doing about issues that we're having in the church today around things like unity, making disciples. And you were talking about divisions, and it sounded a lot like similar themes. So it gives you a sense God's maybe reaching into New England in some different ways. But what have you been seeing when it comes to divisions and dividing? What have you been seeing in your network?
Well, I think the reality is that our churches, our culture has always had a lot of divisions in it. I think what's become maybe much more pronounced recently is the degree of polarization, of animosity, of lack of curiosity with each other, of assumptions about intentions. And so there's this way that the people who disagree with me aren't just different, they're actually evil. And I think that has been a really important change. And it's one thing when we see that in the world, and I think there's always been the tendency, unfortunately, among evangelicals to draw those kind of distinctions with insiders and outsiders. The people in the church are good and the people outside of the church are evil, right? Sheep and wolves. And I think that sometimes we have actually maybe even encouraged that, because it allows us to feel good about ourselves and to sort of explain our discomfort with others. So I think there's a way that perhaps we allowed that for too long. But now that spirit that has become so polemical and so divisive in our broader culture has really penetrated into our churches. And we're seeing, people dividing more and more and more narrowly, and, unwilling to compromise, to be in conversation, all that kind of stuff. And so I get that. And a lot of people have the idea that church should be the place where I get to be with people that I'm comfortable with. And what we don't usually think through is what we mean by that is I want people who won't challenge me too much, won't make me feel uncomfortable, won't question a lot of my assumptions. And so when we end up having some of these dilemmas that have come up over the last few years and some of the new conversations, and we realize, hold it, this relationship is now becoming too challenging. I think that's when people that I'm out. And or maybe, you didn't ask, but I'm going to just launch it anyway. I think one of the things I've noticed is a lot of times people would say, oh, no, we like to get challenged at church. And people kind of boast about the fact, oh, our pastor really, brings the word and says a hard word. And, we kind of think, oh, that's a virtuous thing. And I think my experience has been, having been now pastor for many, many years, that in seasons of relative ease and comfort, people come to church looking for a challenge. And in our culture, we've had a lot of seasons of relative comfort. And in New England, we've had a lot of seasons of relative comfort. But in seasons of challenge, like what we've experienced the last couple of years, people come to church in search of comfort. And yet, I think Jesus is an interesting conundrum in this, in that Jesus is very comforting to people you'd expect him to challenge, and very challenging to people you'd expect him to comfort. And so I think there's this general assumption that that church is going to be this safe, unchallenging space. And I guess I just don't share that assumption. I think, no, church should be a super challenging space where we're being, called out of the going with the flow, sort of, being fit into the mold, and now kind of resisting that, fighting against it, following Jesus in these radical sacrificial ways. So I think that, sorry.
No, I'm one of those lay people I agree. I want church to be hugely challenging for those people.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
As soon as you challenge me, I'm not liking it so much.
That's right. That's it.
And so do you think it's that overt in your experience that you say something and I don't like that thing, or this other person says something, I don't like it, so I'm going to leave? Or is it something just doesn't feel right about this place? And I may not be able to put words to it. And so I'm not comfortable here. It's not the right church for me. Is it one of those or both of those or something else?
Oh, it's definitely both.
Okay.
I think there are people who will, I mean, every pastor's had this experience where you say something that is, could be very true. It could be thoughtful. It could be healthy and godly. And yet somebody hears it and it kind of rubs them the wrong way for reasons that they may not be ready to examine, right? That some issue out of their own past, their own biases, their own privilege, whatever it is. And that's it. They're done. And, or maybe they'll come to you and sort of demand a retraction.
Mm.
And if you don't give it, right, forget it. I'm done, right? My way or the highway. And so there's that crowd. But you're right. There's a lot of other folks who just start to feel like, I'm not sure I fit here anymore. And here again, the assumption is, right, and there's some truth in this, which is what makes this lie so virulent. The truth is, you're right. It's supposed to be, a church should be a community where we love each other. I think the problem is so many of us have become acclimated to communities that find unity through uniformity. That then we assume uniformity is necessary to experience unity at all. And a lot of us are maybe too savvy to call out and say, oh, I want people to be the same race that I am, the same socioeconomic class that I am. We wouldn't say it, but when we go shopping for churches, we look for a place where I might fit in, which means people are uniform to me, which is going to be a group of people who don't challenge me too much. And I think that's the way that we self-select oftentimes into very narrow demographic groups. And what we don't understand is Jesus is calling us into a very different kind of community, right? Jesus brings together disciples. I think this might be one of the kind of the first and one of the greatest examples. We think of, okay, he got these, 12 guys together. That's pretty, they're all men, they're all Jewish. That's a pretty, homogenous group. I don't know how much we've looked at that very carefully, because you've got James and John are nicknamed the sons of thunder, right? I mean, unless they had like a gas problem, that probably is a temper issue. And then you've got Matthew, the tax collector, and Simon the zealot. And zealots nowadays are what we would call terrorists. Yeah. And they were trying to kill the Roman collaborators, mostly in the form of tax collectors. And so then he brings Matthew, the tax collector, and Simon the zealot into the same group and says, if you can love each other, then everybody's going to know that you're my disciples. Yeah. And that is the challenge of the church, is not that we find those people who are easy to love, but that we learn how to love in a way that the world is not used to. And we learn how to love in a way that overcomes these barriers, that requires sacrifice and forgiveness and hurt feelings. So I always tell people, just because you feel awkward at church, that doesn't mean that it's failing. That actually could be a sign that it's succeeding, because you're getting into the kind of relationships, these boundary breaking relationships, that are so much easier to avoid in our world.
So what should I be looking for when I'm looking for a church then? Because I think you're right. I think we go in with that consumer mindset of where am I fed? Where do I have the programs I want? What should we be looking for?
Well, I would say I want to be looking for a place where there is a kind of a vibrant spirituality, by which I mean not loud music. What I mean by vibrant spirituality is it's a kind of following of Jesus that leads to life transformation. And so I want to be looking for those signs of transformation, that people are actually changing. And so I think when I can see that people are changing because they're following Jesus, that's probably going to be the most important first sign. And then you've got to find a place where people are actually interested in community, are open to relationships. Every church, without exception, I've never, ever met the church that didn't say, oh, no, we're a very welcoming church. I have a lot of churches that invite me in to kind of give them some help and consulting or whatever. And I'll go and I'll visit. And I always tell them, just, I'll come, but you can't tell anybody I'm coming. All right, I'm just going to show up. Mm-hmm. And then they all boasted to me about how welcoming they are, and say, yeah, you're very welcoming to each other, right? But when someone new walks in, right, especially if it's someone who doesn't fit your demographic profile, then either you treat them like they're not even there, or like, you know, there's some kind of you know person who deserves some kind of special treatment, right? And it's kind of almost artificial. And there isn't this ability just to kind of accept and warmly welcome people. So I do want to find a place where people are interested in boundary breaking relationships,
Yeah.
and there's a kind of proactivity that I'm going to be looking for there. And then I want to find, is there a place, is this church have a place where I have something to give that I can see? Because a lot of times what will happen is you get the people who are really into fill in the blank. They're really into prayer. And then they look for a church and they go, oh, there's not enough prayer here. This is not a good church for me. And I go, what? No, 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 no. This is the perfect church for you. They need you, right? Or I'm really into missions, or I'm really into evangelism. And oh, this church doesn't share that enough. And I go, right. You are that part of the body.
Yeah.
So bring it to a body that needs it so that whole body can be complete.
That's a great point. I always joke with a pastor I know who we went to a church for 6 months at one point, and it was 6 months before anybody who wasn't on staff said hello to us. And now we're introverts, so this is partly our fault. But I'm like, 6 months, and I said, well, it's New England. You don't waste a hello on someone who's not going to be around for the long haul, right?
Yeah, that one, sadly, there's truth in that. Yeah.
See, so is there anything inherently wrong with looking to join together with people who have shared interests and experiences with me?
Absolutely not. I think that is always going to be a part of our relationships. I think being able to expand our sense of what we mean by those shared interests. And so I would say my primary interest is in following Jesus. And I think it's also wonderful that I have certain friends who share some of my hobbies, or kind of enjoy some of the same kind of entertainment I enjoy. All of those things are good, but if I'm limiting my Christian fellowship to the people who share my common life experience or whatever, well, then I'm not going to get challenged with a lot of other experiences. If they share my same Enneagram profile, my same personality type, my same favorite type of worship music, even, right? My favorite way of praying. If I find the people where I fit perfectly, then I will not be challenged at all. So I think that you want to find this balance of commonality and distinction, and that's where I feel like there can be kind of tight groups of friends within a larger church, but the church, I hope, ends up incorporating a variety of personality types and perspectives and experiences, and those things would also include socioeconomic distinctions and ethnic distinctions, right? So we're going to have different life experiences that now we can bring into that conversation.
And in some cases, that ethnic one is a little harder to do, especially in the northern states of New England. But it can be, to your point, socioeconomic. It can be blue collar, white collar. It can be, there's all, single parents, married parents. There's a whole lot of things that would fall under diversity that we should be seeking out.
Absolutely right.
And so what causes us to do this? Is there a root cause we can point to and say, here's why people are thinking about this or approaching it wrong when we start looking for what I want in a church?
Well, before we throw the people under the bus, I actually think our churches have maybe been malformed in this way, and it's not the people's fault. There's a missionary named Donald McGavran. He had grown up; he's a third generation missionary in India, and he watched missions there kind of firsthand. And one of the things that they realized is back in, I think, the 1930s, one of the things that they realized is that people tended to be like being with people like themselves. That's just a human thing. And in fact, they noticed that if they started a church in a kind of a new area, whatever their first converts were, whatever caste they were, pretty much the whole church became that caste. And the people of the different casts didn't want to be there, didn't feel welcome, didn't feel like their story was understood or experienced. And so what he realized is we've been doing too much work of trying to just build churches in different neighborhoods. What we need to do is within a neighborhood, build churches for each of the different castes. And what he found there is then the number of people coming to Christ exploded. So it was super effective. He ends up coming back, became a professor at Fuller, and then taught a whole generation of church planters this technique. And it's called the homogeneous unit principle. And so you find one target audience, and that's your church is going to go after that target audience. And probably the most fully realized example of this was Rick Warren, when he started Saddleback Church, literally had a photograph of Saddleback Sam. And then the many pages of description of what Saddleback Sam was like, what he liked to do in his free time, how much money he made, what kind of profession he had, what kind of education he had, what neighborhood he lived in, his family structure, all kinds of things. And they said, okay, we're going to go after this guy. And because that guy likes being with other people like that guy, man, the church took off. And this became the model that not just kind of implicitly, but explicitly, most churches that have been planted in the last 50 years have been planted deliberately with this model in mind. Choose your target audience. Okay, how do you reach them? And on the one hand, I think it's been incredibly effective. We saw church growth just take off. And of course, as Christians, we're going to think, well, that's great. This is exactly what we want to see. But if you'll excuse a little story, I had sort of an epiphany about this, and it's this. So my wife had one of those big, birthdays that ends in a zero not long ago, and
30, right?
Whatever it was. It ended in a zero, and so I want you to imagine that I thought, oh, okay, this is a big one. I want to do something really extravagant for her, and so. I'm just racking my brain trying to think about what could that be? What could that be? And finally I realized, oh, okay, I'm going to go buy her something really great. And so I'm going down, I'm trying to look at shops and try to get these ideas. And I look in the window of jewelry shops and I don't see it. And I look at, and as I'm walking down Newbury Street, I walk by the most beautiful fur coat that has ever existed. I mean, it's just stunning. I think I've got to go see this thing. I walk inside and I touch it. It's so soft. I cannot believe it. And so I look at the price tag and think, oh my goodness, this is a lot more than I thought I was going to pay. But okay, it's so beautiful. It's so gorgeous. Okay, wrap it up. I got to take it. I'm going to take out a loan on my house. I'm going to get this. I love my wife that much. And so then I wrap this thing up and I bring it to her, and on her birthday, and I open up and say, hey, babe, here you go. And I'm just so excited. I can't wait. She opens it up and I just see her face fall. And I say, hey, babe, don't you love this coat? I mean, touch it. It's so soft. She said, yeah, Dave, huh? But after all these years we've been together, don't you know that I have an ethical problem with fur coats? I don't want to, but no, but this is a beautiful fur coat. You should see how much I spent. Right?
I'm a husband. I have no idea what you think.
and so the idea that I've sacrificed so much to get her this gift that was extravagant and not the gift she wanted. And I wonder sometimes if those of us who lead large churches are going to show up, in front of Jesus on the day of judgment and say, Jesus, look what I got for you. It's incredible. It's this massive church of people who are all exactly the same, isn't it? And Jesus is going to say, oh, Dave, did you not read the Gospels? I mean, did you not read Ephesians or really any of the letters of Paul about his whole ministry? Did you not read Acts? Gosh, Dave, how did you not know that this isn't the gift that I wanted? And I think that for me has been a really important thing, is recognizing that we have used size too often as the measure of success. And that would be like using sort of the price as the measure of the value of a gift I got from my wife. And I think that's where we've gotten it wrong. But I think what Jesus has actually called us to make is not huge communities. It's boundary breaking communities,
Mm.
right? Crossing lines. That actually, I think, is an essential piece of the kingdom. And I think when we do that well, yeah, there are going to be some people who are not excited by that. But I think also there's something about all of us that wants to be in a community like that.
Yeah.
So when people can see it done well, I don't know that we end up in the end having to choose between diverse and large. But when I have to choose, I want to choose the courage to cross boundaries, not the complacency of staying within my comfort zones.
So is there something we're missing in the church or in churches where we get somebody in who we're all consumers at the end of the day because we grow up in a consumer culture. We don't even know how many consumers we are. Is there something missing in those people who come in and become believers that is stopping us from becoming the person you're talking about?
Well, I think you're right. In a lot of ways, we have accommodated consumerism because it works. People like it. And as pastors, those of us who go into ministry, we like people and we like to be liked. And
Mm,
so it's nice when you can give people what they want and they're pleased with you.
mm,
So I do think there's that kind of that dangerous lure towards, pastors accommodating the consumerism of our people
mm,
rather than challenging it. But I think in a lot of ways, we're not being discipled into the kind of life that is only possible, right? The full life that Jesus calls us to, that's only possible on the other side of death.
mm,
And so, the call to follow Jesus, the call to take up your cross and die, right? That's really the call to Jesus. But it's not a dour call. It's this exciting, enticing call because it's actually the call to rise to new life. And I think that we've been so wary, hesitant about calling people to die, challenging people
mm.
actually to choose their own death, to die to some of your dreams and your ambitions and your demands for the way your life is supposed to be and your privileges that you have. We've been slow to encourage people to die to those things. And then they don't end up experiencing the fullness of life that's on the other side. And so I think in that way, sometimes we have we've made church too comfortable in that sense, and I think that we make it very comfortable for ourselves and uncomfortable for outsiders. If I look at the ministry of Jesus, I see Jesus seemed to make it very comfortable for outsiders and really uncomfortable for the people on the inside, challenging them to take these next steps in discipleship.
Is there a gap though in that, when you say to me, "Hey, surrender," I sit there going, "Well, I have, right?"
Hmm.
And but there's 112 things I haven't.
That's right.
I can point to things I have, so I'm okay, and I think I'm on the path the right way. Is there a missing piece in that somebody needs to be able to say to me, "Actually, Charles, right? This does not reflect the love of Jesus. This is not what a disciple of Jesus is." There a missing piece about, I don't know if it's accountability or a relational? Is there something missing in that?
One of the things that we talk about, our mission statement is that, or our vision is to create Christian communities
Mhm.
that inspire curiosity and compassion. And I think that curiosity piece is really important. I want people to be curious about God, asking new questions rather than just kind of holding on to their certainty, right? I know
Mhm.
what I know.
Mm.
Well, actually, God's thoughts are so much higher than your thoughts. What you know could fit in a thimble, compared to the ocean. I mean, forget it. You're nothing. So, can we have curiosity about what you don't know? Curiosity about God, curiosity about other people. And so, instead of me assuming I understand their story just because I looked at them and I judged the book by the cover, I want to be curious about them. But I actually think one of the most important ones is being curious about ourselves,
Mm.
right? Jeremiah says the human heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it? And so the illusion that I even know my own self is actually keeping me from being able to engage God in a much deeper way.
Mm.
And so, kind of the way you said it, I know you were trying to do it for effect, but Charles, there's something about you that's not consistent with the love of Jesus. Man, that just sounds so
Not,
judgmental,
yeah, not
condemning.
that there's anything about me that doesn't reflect the love of
Of course,
Jesus,
of course.
obviously.
It's just hypothetical. But I think that does not reflect curiosity, even in the way that statement is made,
Mm.
right? But what I would love for somebody to say is, hey, Charles, I'm noticing this in you, and I'm curious, how does that go together with this part of what it means to follow Jesus?
Yeah.
And now Jesus gets to say some of those things more clearly because, of course, Jesus does know in a way that we don't. I can
Yeah.
only guess. And I want to be really cautious before I become the Holy Spirit for you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I can be a part of the way the Spirit's going to work and inviting you to asking better questions about yourself. So, hey, Charles, I noticed that, you just spent money on this, or the way that you just, when your wife said something to you, I noticed kind of the tone that you used when you spoke back. I'm
Mm.
curious. And I want to invite you to be curious with me about what
Mm.
might be going on in you in that moment. And I'm curious about kind of what do you think Jesus says about this? And let's have a conversation. So I think that curiosity is really key. But then, I think about the rich young ruler, right? And uh, you know, all these I've done since I was a boy, right? He had made all these sacrifices. He'd done all the right things. And Jesus says it looked on him with compassion,
Mm.
right? Jesus isn't like, ha ha ha, I got you now. No, Jesus looks on him with compassion. Jesus loves this guy
Mm.
and says, one thing you lack. And for him, right, Jesus obviously could see in his heart, because this isn't the thing that Jesus calls everybody to. Jesus told the centurions, the people who said, hey, what do we need to do? Be content with your pay. But to this guy, he says, because he knows the hold apparently that money has on his heart, sell all you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. Right. And it wasn't, I want to take away the good things. It's, I want to take away that thing that's getting in the way
Mm.
of you being able to experience the best things.
Yeah.
And for you, I think it may be your relationship with money. And so I would love for the rest of us, instead of having that, I don't know, kind of a, Jesus gets to be a know-it-all because Jesus knows it all. But when the rest of us do that, we come off as know-it-alls.
Yeah.
And too often Christians do that.
Yeah.
Right? We come off with this judgment where we should be approaching with curiosity.
So 2 minutes left. What would be one thing you would say to all of us, knowing that we all have different issues, but one thing that we all ought to at least consider, be curious about, investigate, whatever you want to say about it? What should we all be rethinking?
I think these days, gosh, there's so many that we could talk about. So I'm just going to kind of speak to this particular moment. Uh, Things are becoming so polarized. And so it's not just that, I'm conservative and you're liberal, or, I'm a Democrat, you're Republican. We've gone to the extremes of things. And now, as I say, we're not curious about our own story. Why is this so important to me? And we're not curious about the other person. Why do they see this differently from me? We're
Mm.
so quick to judge ourselves as righteous and the others as evil. And I think there needs to be a much more humility in this space, where we say, I don't know my own heart, and maybe I don't know all of the things that are motivating me, and why, what gives this such emotional power in my life that I feel so strongly about this. I think that we should become more suspicious of ourselves and more generous towards others. And I'll say, actually, I think even especially in the abortion debate, that there's so much talking and declaring, but not very much curiosity or just interest. Hey, I want to listen to you. I want to hear you. And I actually think that there are people on both sides of this debate who are actually trying to defend the Imago Dei and are sort of putting the emphasis on different syllables.
Mm.
And if we could listen to each other long enough, understand, why is this important to you? What does this matter? I actually think we could probably find a lot of places that we would agree, and then could move together towards, okay, well, now what are constructive policies that we could make that would actually honor this the shared impulse that we have, these shared values. So finding common values instead of concentrating on unshared positions.
Hmm.
I think that to me would be my if I could encourage us in one thing, maybe that would be it.
That's a great one to end on, Dave. Thanks so much. Thanks for being with us. And thanks for really a lot of great insights that I think are helpful to me, and I assume are helpful, and I trust are helpful to other people. So I'd also like to thank our producer, Jess Mangano, and our listeners. I hope this dialogue helps us be the people of God who do the work of God, making disciples, doing justice, fostering unity, and sharing Jesus to transform our world. Visit us at visionnewengland.org for past episodes and resources, and click on donate to help to work with us to accelerate evangelism in New England. This program is brought to you by our friends at the Luis Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide.